Hi, welcome to a new episode of Sportsy Let's Talk Sports. Today we have with us Denise Zack, who is an author, a certified life coach, a mindset and mindfulness consultant, a certified MBTI practitioner, a podcast host, and the owner of Ripple Effect Life Coaching. She has over 20 years of expertise in consultation, instruction, and coaching in wellness, emotional intelligence, and mindfulness. Her work focuses on enhancing the development of executive functioning life skills, self empowerment, mindfulness, compassion, communication, self regulation, and authenticity. She helps clients across the corporate CXO level to elite athletes to teams engage in conversations around the way they show up to life every day. Through next level discussions and activities, participants are able to gain insight into the automatic and reactive pattern that hold them back and helps create a lasting positive change in their life. Her book, Ripple Effect, Change Your Mind, Change Your Life, is a culmination of her life's work, experiences, and challenges. Her book can be found at the link in the description. So please welcome mindfulness and mindset coach, a podcast host, meditation and yoga instructor, and author of Ripple Effect, Denise Zack, talking about mindset matters. Hey Denise, it's great to have you on Sportsy. Let's talk sports.
Wonderful. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. It's not every day that we get to host our chat show is about around the sports ecosystem, but it's not every day that we get to host somebody who's a mindfulness and mindset life coach. And my Somebody who is also into podcasting. You are also a meditation yoga instructor. You just got your book out called Ripple Effect. Denise, I'm just looking forward to having this chat around the overall meditation, yoga, emotional intelligence, mindfulness in the journey of common people. At the same time, something to do with the sports and athlete. That's about. So, and really happy to have you here.
Great. I'm really excited to talk about it.
So, Denise, I think there's a lot to read about you, your work, which has over 20, 25 years of working in emotional well-being. But the first point that comes out to our mind, what got you interested in the topic like meditation, yoga, emotional intelligence, or mindfulness? Because I think education-wise, you are from psychology background to I think human element background, but then after that, the long journey about all these topics. So what got you attracted to this?
Yeah. So, I worked at a university and for 20 years I worked there. The first, half to maybe 2/3 of my time there, I was mainly focused on kind of the reactionary support that I was giving students. They were coming in after things had already gone wrong and something was out of sync in their life, or they felt out of control, or they felt like the normal way that they would normally solve a problem wasn't working. And so that was when they would come in, and it was great and it was wonderful, but there was just the sheer number of students coming in, and the faculty requests for support with students and coaches coming in and saying, hey, we're having a tough time with the team or with this particular student on the team, and how can you help us? And at the same time, when I was going through a personal thing in my life, my husband was actually diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. He had a 1% chance of survival. It was a hugely stressful time in my life. And as a therapist, knowing that I'm teaching people all the time how to take care of themselves, how to be the best that they can be, and how to work through challenging situations, I had to do my best to show up in this moment because I had 2 small children. I had my full-time job and I had to take care of the family, my husband, and all of it. So I had ironically started my yoga teacher training at that time. When I went into the training, when I started doing meditations and yoga, I would leave those sessions feeling good. And I thought, this doesn't make any sense. Why do I feel good in this moment? There's no reason for me to feel good because a lot of things are going wrong in my life. And that got me curious. The psychologist side of me, the licensed therapist side of me thought, what's going on in my brain that's making this happen? Or allowing this to happen even more accurately. And I started doing the research and reading a lot about what happens in the brain when we practice meditative and mindful activities. And long story short, there are parts of the brain that are reactive and parts of the brain that help us be logical and calm us down. Mindful activities live in the part of the brain that calms us down naturally. And so the goal going into them isn't to calm down, but the end result technically or usually is, because you're activating that part of the brain, blood flow is going to that part of the brain. So that got me super interested in not only continuing to help myself and what I was doing and helping me work through a really difficult time, but to bring that practice to the work that I was doing and to help students, to help staff and faculty, to help coaches and teams to really understand mindset, mindfulness, emotional regulation, and emotional intelligence to help them perform, to produce, to be more productive in their life and to be happier, really.
Yeah, I think you put it pretty well. It's finally at the end of the day, it's about being happy, feeling good about yourself, and having everybody's carrying a baggage, everybody's going through different challenges. So, how do you find the right balance? I think that is something really well said, and what you're doing, and that's what the next question was. Probably, I think you partially answered that already. But the what I want to ask you about on these things is, while you have experienced all these things and the thing that you are already practicing on mindfulness, emotional intelligence, how do you see over the 20 years the change has happened in your practice, or the way you are conducting yourself, or the patient that you've been dealing with for longest time? How do you think this has matured over time?
Yeah, so life changes all the time. I mean, that is the one constant thing in life, is that things always change. The nature of the work that I did changed from day one until the day I left the university, and continues to change now. We can't stay stagnant in our education, in our awareness, in how we operate in the world, because the world is constantly changing and constantly evolving. And so the work that I did in the reflective way, or in the reactive way, excuse me, was great. And I really loved helping people kind of work out of difficult situations. But what I realized over time is that people need help to be able to really understand the world that's changing around them constantly, to be able to operate on a moment-to-moment basis when things change around them, and to have the skills, develop the skills necessary to be able to manage their emotions in all of that. So the world is constantly changing, so we have to adapt constantly. And it doesn't mean that you have to reinvent the wheel. It means that you've got a strong base, and every day you're taking another step towards what you think is going to be most helpful for you, and finding the latest research and the latest information to help you do that, to help you show up in the most effective way possible. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. I think it does answer the question, and and that is where I think the maturity of the market, or the practice, or the consultants who've been in this industry, because when you started all this thing, it wasn't a topic which people are discussing openly. It was still a taboo. It's a thing of it is breaking. The taboo is breaking, and people are more openly talking about it. But that's where the part of my the second part of my question is, how do you differentiate between the mental well-being and mental strengthening? I'm sure you can guess where I'm leaning towards the sports discussion of mental strengthening, but I want to understand from you as a practitioner, how do you differentiate between mental well-being and strengthening?
Yeah, so mental well-being is a general kind of overarching approach to making sure that your mind is healthy, right? And that could be in a number of different ways, and doing the things that you need to take care of your mind on a day-to-day basis. Mental strengthening and conditioning for me is something a little bit more specific. And I think, especially if I'm working with athletes, or if I'm working with someone who needs or a CEO, a leader of a company that's looking specifically to work on a particular aspect of their mindset that needs work, and they know exactly what that issue is. Or maybe I'm helping them discover a blind spot that they weren't aware was there before, and helping them to develop the skills specifically to address that particular thing. That helps to create well-being, right? So well-being is this kind of overarching concept or construct of wellness and health. And conditioning is the process of how you do that. Strengthening is the process of how you go about doing that, and knowing what it is that needs to be strengthened. What is it that you in particular need to work on? What are your barriers? What are the things that hold you back? And how do you hold yourself accountable in those moments, and then take the steps necessary to be able to move forward in a more productive, more effective, more successful way, however you define that. And no one can define it for you. That's got to be something that you define for your own self, because no one knows you better than you know yourself. No one knows what it is that you're really struggling with. No one knows the thoughts that are going through your mind and your brain the way that you do. And so you're the only one that can really address those and get to those pieces that need to be addressed. And I think that's where the strengthening piece comes in, because we've got to be accountable for how we show up. We've got to take responsibility for it. And there are so many different strategies that we can implement if we take the time to do them. And that's easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure it is easier said than done. And I deal with so many athletes, and everybody says that I know what I am, but sometimes I don't know how do I cross that bridge, and what do I do? I'm in the best of my mental health, but I'm not able to do that. So I'm probably not able to concentrate, and that is affecting the performance. So there are so many things which are in the whole ecosystem. But I think you very well put in. It's very easy for somebody to understand. The mental well-being is overall mothership, where the strengthening is something that you work on the specific thing. But while we're talking about the overall mothership of mental well-being, and mental strengthening is a part of it, how actually what is mindfulness, and how does mindfulness actually helps in the strength and the conditioning part of it?
So mindfulness is the practice of being in the present moment, experiencing all that the present moment has to offer without judgment, which is the hard part, right? We are not trained to sit in non-judgment in our world. We are trained to observe, judge, and then report, right? And so mindfulness is the practice of observing and sitting, and that's it. Because that's where awareness comes in. When you're judging, you're becoming activated. You're using an emotional reaction to say, this is good, this is bad, this is horrible, this is wonderful. And that takes you away from the actual experience of the moment. Mindfulness is paying attention to what you can see, touch, taste, smell, hear. So everything that's around you, but also the quality of your thoughts, your emotions, and then any sensations that you experience in your body. Those are the 8 elements of being mindful. Why mindfulness works is, and how it helps in terms of mental conditioning and mental strengthening, is that, as I stated before, it operates in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And I know that a lot of athletes think they have to run on pure adrenaline and intense emotion and really just kind of get in there and fire and shoot like a cannon. And while intensity is important, controlled intensity is what's more important. Because if you just shoot out of a cannon, but you haven't thought about where you're aiming and how far the cannon needs to go, you're going to be way off your mark. It is much better to be mindful and to think about, what kind of intensity do I need in this moment? What did I mess up on the last time? How did it impact me? What did I learn about that? And how can I move forward in the most effective way? That's a mindful approach to being successful. Mindfulness, again, activates the part of the brain. And I guess if this is your brain and the part of the brain that's reactive and kind of that fight, flight, or freeze and Tasmanian devil kind of mentality is, if I flip my lid, literally or figuratively, in the middle of the brain is the midbrain. And in the middle of the midbrain is a structure called the amygdala. It's responsible for your fight, flight, or freeze response. That is when we kind of react on the Richter scale of life, like a 10, when the situation was a 1 or a 2. And we think later, I shouldn't have overreacted like that. We can thank the amygdala for that. I want to not flip my lid. Mindfulness is not flipping your lid. It is hanging out here, right here in your prefrontal cortex. This has a structure in it called, or a nerve in it called the vagus nerve, which goes all the way down into your belly. So our mind and our body are intrinsically connected, and it is responsible, that nerve is responsible for rest and digest. And so when we activate the prefrontal cortex, mindfulness activates it, and it allows you to take a step back, observe what you're seeing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and then understand how you're reacting to the situation, but also how you're being impacted by everything and everyone around you. And then, and only then, do you choose how you want to respond in that moment. Instead of reacting, it allows you to take an opportunity to respond. That's why mindfulness is so important when you think about sports and being successful there, is because you're in the flow in those moments when everything else, nothing else matters but that moment. How you're swinging the bat in that moment, how you're kicking the ball in that moment, what other players are on the field, the dynamic of the energy between the players and what you need to do in those moments. That's when mindfulness allows you to be strategic, to be logical, to be on your mark and on the game when you're practicing the mindfulness, instead of, and yes, we need to be able to pivot quickly and be able to respond to unintended things in the moment as well, but that those get sharper and your reactions become quicker when you have trained your mind to be more logical and aware. So that's the way that I think of mindfulness.
Interesting. And how do you talk to an athlete about all these things who are driven by adrenaline and probably not focused on this aspect of being in present? So how do you actually talk to an athlete to do that on off switch probably and start getting more conscious about what they are and what they can achieve? So probably just the question is, how do you help them understand their potential?
So a couple of different ways. One is by, I talk with coaches about role modeling mindfulness, their observations, their showing up in a non-reactive way, but in a way that allows them to reflect on, instead of yelling at an athlete because they did something wrong, taking a step back and really trying to figure out, what happened in that moment, what can we do to change it, and how do we move forward, but also talking with the athletes about where they struggle, teaching them mindfulness, first and foremost, practicing mindfulness on a day-to-day basis, practicing meditation, just practicing sitting with your body, being aware of how your body, getting to know yourself and getting to really sit with yourself in those quiet moments to really understand how your brain works and what kind of thoughts pop up on a regular basis. What is your regular internal thought process, and really helping you to just practice the mindful space so that you can learn how to be quiet and just listen and just pay attention. In addition to that, I've worked with athletes who've had specific issues. I'll give you an example, and this is an example in my book, and the student actually gives me permission to talk about this. I've worked with tons of athletes, but I love this story because I worked with a student who was on track and field. And one of the events, there are multiple events with track and field, and one of them was hurdles. And she came into the mindfulness sessions and she said, "I hate hurdles." And I said, "Okay, that's a belief that you have. Why do you hate hurdles?" She said, "Well, I'm terrible at them." "What makes you think you're terrible at them?" "Well, I can't do them. I'm worse than everyone else. When I know that we're going to be practicing hurdles, I know that it's not going to be good." I said, "Well, tell me what happens when you go to practice hurdles." So here, now I'm trying to really get into her, the thinking and what's ticking in her brain in those moments. She said, I said, "Tell me what happens the entire practice. You get there, you're practicing hurdles." She said, "A feeling of dread comes over my body. I become obsessed with or overthinking about if I'm going to fall, what I'm going to look like, the other teammates, they're going to judge me. My coach is going to get mad. I'm going to get kicked off the team. I'm going to lose my scholarship. I'm going to have to leave school." Whoa, right? So these are there's an activity in my book called pillow piling. You've got one problem and then you pile 50 pillows on top of it that related to it, but not necessarily true or accurate in any way, shape, or form. And I said, "Okay, let's get back to the base pillow. The fact that you don't like the hurdles, you have not yet been successful at them. I said, but think about this. You're jumping over the hurdles with every one of those pillows in your hands. How are you going to be good at them if you're distracted by all of these other thoughts swirling around in your head? You've got to focus only on the hurdle and what your body needs to do in that moment. So let's change the dynamic of your brain and how your brain operates when you go to practice the next time and hurdles are happening. None of those thoughts come up. If you start to see them come up, notice them, be mindful, take a step back and say, okay, how did I tell myself I wanted to show up in this moment? And we came up with a series of statements that she could use to help her. And she said, today, I'm going to focus like I've never focused on the hurdles. I'm going to make the hurdles my number one event today. And we came up, I can't remember exactly all of the thoughts that we came up with, but she generated them. They were her thoughts. And she went to practice and she came back a couple of weeks later and she said, I did awesome. I did better on the hurdles than I've ever done in my life. Now, she went through an 8-week mindfulness series with me. She was wonderful. It was towards the end of the series that she started doing well with this. This was her freshman year. She came back. I had seen her on and off campus. We'd wave. She came back to take the mindfulness again because I taught it every semester. I taught an 8-week series every semester. And she said, I just wanted to take this one more time before I graduate because I really want all of the skills to sink in. I said, well, how was track? And she said, it was great. She said, hurdles became my best event.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, okay, this mindfulness does work, right? So that's specifically how I work with that student. And you'll work with each student differently, but you have to understand where they're coming from and what their blind spots are, help them to understand what they are, and then move forward from there.
Yeah, I think the story you mentioned is, I think, fits pretty well, and it's as for let's focus on the base pillow with the base issue that you have, rather than getting bogged down by all the thing. I think it's a and even though every athlete or every individual will have their own problems or have their own challenges, the baseline doesn't change. Let's focus on the basic core thing, get drilled down, and that's where I think the experts like you make a tremendous impact in the journey. But sorry. But Denise, when we're talking about the athletes and even the non-athlete, everybody is going through some challenge or other. In last couple of years, what we have seen is anxiety and depression are the major issues that many people are facing, and now more than ever. How can you actually help athlete face these kind of things, that it is there for me, or who are battling these kind of issues, to stay mentally focused and really strong towards achieving what they want to achieve when the things are not in their control? When things are in your control, I think the coaches can do other job. But when things are not in their control, I think the experts like you come into picture and help them. But what has been your learning in last 2 years? Because these have been unprecedented. Last couple of years have been unprecedented. So there are different challenges that we get to see, and you work with the corporate CXO level people to athlete to everybody. So how do you actually help them understand or face the issue, or basically face the demons, or face the battle that they're fighting?
There's a bunch of different ways to approach this, and all of them are important, equally important. First and foremost, just as a society, we have got to reduce the stigma around mental health issues. There is still too much judgment and misunderstanding and misinformation that gets disseminated or is projected onto people in general, but especially athletes who are expected to be perfect and who are expected to perform at these sometimes not the these intense levels, and I think that we as a society think that an athlete should just be able to brush it off and just push through it, because that's what your training is. You're trained to just kind of push everything else away. But mental illness, it's like someone who breaks an ankle and telling them to get back on the field. Mental illness can be that much of of an issue and a hindrance on the field, on the court, or wherever you are. And so we have to work as a society to destigmatize that. So what that translates into, coaches, trainers, managers of teams have to create a culture of awareness and acceptance. We too far, and not just in sports, but in general, in business and corporate settings, in families, we leave it up to the person to fix themselves. Oh, you're depressed or anxious, well, go fix yourself, go do whatever you need to do, but come back here and do your job and get it done the right way. We have to create a culture of wellness and of understanding and of acceptance in the workplace, on the field, wherever it is. And that starts from the top down. We have to be open, we have to be honest, we have to put structures and systems into place that support people, that support athletes, that allow them to talk with whoever they need to talk to, but also create well-being, that you're bringing activities and speakers in, or different strategies that allow athletes to manage their well-being, to feel like they're heard, and to feel like they have someplace to go if they are struggling, that they don't have to hide it and they don't have to suffer in silence. And then you get to the athlete themselves, then you get to the person themselves, and you talk to them about what it is that's going on for them, and you help them develop the strategies that they need. Maybe they do need to talk to a therapist. Maybe meditation will be helpful for them. Maybe something different will be the answer, but allowing them to explore that, and acknowledging and helping them to accept the fact that this is not a weakness. This is not something that they should be ashamed of or embarrassed about, but something that they can really work through. There are lots of different treatments, lots of successful treatments, whether it's, like I said, therapy, CBT, medication, or some other type of strategy, because there are many other things out there now that people want to try. There are apps now, there are online counselors that you can access 24/7. So that has to be tailored, of course, to the individual, what their symptoms are, the intensity of their symptoms, and what they're comfortable, utilizing or implementing into their life to be able to manage it.
Interesting. And I'm sure there are many methods when you actually meet the athlete or the people that you're dealing with. There are many practical methods, but this in a nutshell was pretty good. But just want to understand one more point that I have read. I have listened to your podcast. I have read some of the part, and you talk about something that reactive patterns. What exactly is reactive pattern, and how does it actually impacts or affects day-to-day life?
So this is a really interesting concept that I think people, for me, is like creates a lot of aha moments. Like, oh, I never realized that. We all have brain patterns. We have billions and billions of neurons in our brain. The ends of each of those neurons have these things called dendrites, or like little fingers coming out, and they attach to one another when we learn something, whether we learn something that's good, or whether we have a negative experience that the brain doesn't want to, or even a negative pattern that we create over and over and over again as a result of some experience that we've had. So you learn to walk, you learn to talk, you learn to read. You don't unlearn those things unless that neural pattern is broken. That pattern will stay there for your entire life. Stroke victims, when their brain patterns are, their brain is damaged by the stroke, sometimes those neural firing patterns that have wired together get broken. And that's why people who are stroke victims need to learn to walk again, or talk again, or eat again. So we all have these neural wiring patterns in our brain. We have belief systems that generate as a result of these neural firing patterns. And what I mean by that is we have experiences now beyond the eating and the walking and the talking. We have experiences as children that tend to impact us in either negative or positive ways, or benign ways. And we develop neural patterns as a result of that. So if you have a very supportive parent that tells you you can accomplish anything and don't ever give up, and that was wonderful, you did great, and next time, what can we do differently to get even better? And you feel like you have that support, you will have a very strong growth mentality, neural firing pattern in your brain. Likewise, if you have a parent who talked opposite to you and told you you're no good, you'll never amount to anything, you shouldn't even try, just give up, there's nothing good about that, what you did, and there's no way you're ever going to be good at that. Now, it doesn't mean that if your parent did say that to you, that you will never amount to anything, but you're going to have a neural firing pattern in your brain that is likely a little bit more negative. Could be intensely negative, but it could also just be that you heard it, you took in some of it, but maybe you didn't take in all of it. That could be a reactive pattern that you have as you get older. Anytime you try something new, you say, oh, I'm not good at that, if you didn't do great at it right away, and you give up. So one of your reactive patterns could be that you give up anytime you didn't do well at something. And we all know that, you know, we're never good at anything when we first start. Very rarely are we good at something when we first start, but our reactive patterns are such that we experience something, we develop a negative, we can develop if we develop a negative belief about ourselves as a result of it, we can certainly develop positive beliefs as well. But if we develop that negative belief, that reactive pattern is that belief coming out and being triggered in the present moment by the stimuli around us that reinforces that negative pattern, and kind of keep repeating those negative things over and over and over again, just as we repeat positive things over and over and over again.
Okay, so and when we talk about the reactive pattern in our, which is developed, being positive, being negative, they get developed and it affects our life. But how does being mindful plays a role in these reactive patterns? Because you spoke about mindfulness opens up the front part of your brain and gets you in present. But so how does that plays a role with reactive patterns?
Oh, this could take an hour. I'm going to try to make it as succinct and quick as possible. The amygdala that I talked about before, that is responsible for your fight, flight, or freeze response, it is connected to this other structure called the hippocampus that takes memories, especially negative ones, turns them into long-term memory, or situations, and turns them into long-term memory. The amygdala, it's constantly scanning your environment with help from the brainstem. There's a whole other operating system going on, which I'm not going to get into. But whenever something comes up in the present moment that even remotely resembles that old negative pattern, the amygdala responds immediately because it wants to protect you from that negative thing happening again. And so if it was judgment from a parent, and now anytime you think someone is going to judge you, you run away and you just retreat and you avoid conflict and you avoid standing up for yourself, your amygdala is going to say, oh, that's happening again. Oh, here comes judgment. Run away. Flight. Get away. Mindfulness activates this part of the brain. The mindfulness, that the way that I teach it allows you, I teach people to become aware of the patterns that they have, to understand the negative reactive patterns that they have, so that when something happens in the present moment, here's the reaction, here's the negative thing happening, I'm asking them to insert mindfulness before that stimuli gets to the amygdala and you have your overreaction. And so mindfulness allows you to take that step back and say, oh, I'm feeling a certain way right now. Not I am angry, not I am anxious, but I'm noticing a part of me is feeling this way right now. This is connected to an old pattern of me feeling self-conscious, or me wanting to avoid judgment, or me being nervous whenever someone is critiquing me. I understand that now. I'm safe right now. I'm an adult right now. I can be rational right now. And here's how I want to respond instead. That's how mindfulness helps with those reactive patterns.
Wow. And when you said that it's going to take a while, and the way you explained it, I'm sure it's going to be a masterclass when we get to listen to you about this topic. But thank you for putting it in small words and explaining it pretty well. I think that is what was most important, because it was pretty intense talk, but I think you explained it pretty well. in,
Thank
in that. So Denise, there's one more thing that you always talk about, and but sorry, you always talk about, and that I got to read on the blogs and everything, is the intention and attitude. There are two important aspects that you've been talking about. So how do you actually think these two aspects actually apply? How do we apply it to our day-to-day life? And it's the way we call it, the line between arrogance and attitude is also very thin. The same way, the intention and attitude. How can these two things be applied well? Let's take it athlete as an example for our benefit of the viewers and listeners. So how do you think these things get applied?
Yeah, so when I'm working with an athlete, obviously there's so many different dynamics in terms of their performance and how they're going to kind of show up to their day. But the things that I want to work on with them, when I'm specifically talking about their performance, I want to look at what their intentions are, meaning what are they looking to accomplish? What is it that they need to do, and how is it that they want to shift or change in their performance to get better? What is their intended outcome, right? What am I intending to do when I get onto the field? What is my intention in terms of my performance? And it could be kind of a long-term goal, it can be a short-term goal, it can be comprehensive, it can be minute, but I'm really looking at what your intentions are and what it is that you are looking to create as an athlete. Attitude is the way you go about doing it. We can have great intentions, but if our attitude is in the wrong place, if we're kind of beating ourselves up and thinking that, or we're getting beat up by a coach, and that doesn't work for us, then that's going to impact how we perform, and it's going to impact how we get to where we need to get to, or if we get to where we need to get to. So our attitude is our overarching mentality and emotional energy that we are using in order to create the intentions that we want to create. And they work symbiotically together, and both of those impact our behavior. So your intentions impact what you do, how you do it, but your attitude greatly impacts that as well. And so you've got to be aware of both. It's not enough to just set a goal and just get up in the morning and go. We've got to think about what our attitude is in those moments that's going to allow us to be the most successful, and what's going to help us to create and set those intentions in the most appropriate way, so that we can then reach those goals and those outcomes that we so desire.
Yeah. And how do you actually talk to these corporate people or athlete about having the one-to-one relation or one-to-many relation between the intention and attitude? How do they actually relate these two things?
Intention and attitude, they're symbiotic. It's what I try to do is help them think about what their intentions are, understand them, really break them down into measurable steps. So it's, I want to get a Super Bowl ring. Well, that's great. Right? That's wonderful. What is the grind every single day, the resilience that you're going to use every single day in that process that's going to help you to get to that place? What decisions are you going to make? What goals are you going to set? How are you going to reach those goals? And then what attitude are you bringing with you? What is the mental energy that you are using? What are the things that you're saying to yourself on a regular basis? What happens when something goes wrong? How do you manage that challenge and that difficulty? What are some of the things that are holding you back right now? What are some of the beliefs that you have that may not be constructive or helpful at this point? And how does that impact your attitude towards all of the intentions that you have set for yourself? And then see where the breakdown is, see where the cohesiveness is, build on the strengths, and then create some more along the way, so that someone has they have a process in place, and they have the ability at the end of the day to reflect and say, what did I do today that helped me? How did my attitude help me? How did I move forward towards my intentions? What did I do that got in my way? And how can I shift or change that tomorrow? What do I keep building on? And what do I need to change? And how do I keep growing through this process? So we've got to set ourselves up in the morning to have a successful day. We've got to set an intention, either write it down, put it on your calendar, have an accountability partner, whatever it is, whatever you need. You've got to make a commitment to yourself and a commitment that day to do it. And then when you go to bed, you've got to reflect on it. You can't just go to bed mindlessly and think, oh, well, whatever, tomorrow's another day. No, you've got to think about, what did I do today that worked? What was great? What wasn't so great? What got in my way? Who helped me? Who didn't support me? And what needs to shift and change in those things? That's going to impact your attitude. That's going to help you set your intentions, and all of that is going to help you to achieve your greatest performance on the field and off.
Excellent. Denise, it's so good. And while talking, I think we've been talking for quite some time, and I'm sure this chat can go on for longest time. But I want to come to the last part, and it's not like we'll not get a chance to host you again. I think there will be specific points that we'll talk about. But just coming to the last part for today's chat is it's you spoke about how do you make them achieve all this thing, but as we know that meditation is good, yoga is good, everything is pretty good in achieving the mindfulness, but it's not a very sensitive world out there. So how do people, and when we are still breaking the taboos, how do you tell people to deal with it? Just to have to give those few good lines for people to understand and probably relate to themselves. When the world is not sensitive enough towards you, how do you help them deal with it?
So part of it is trying to think about things in a way that helps you to kind of understand the world a little bit more. We pay when someone gives us something negative, right? If someone is judgmental of us, we tend to think about it over and over and over and over again when they've just made the comment and moved on, right? So we give those negative comments and those negative things happening in the world so much more attention, especially when they're pointed at us, than we ever need to. So, I really encourage people the people who are criticizing you generally are not the people who are doing more than you, or the people who are super confident in themselves and where they're going. They're usually people who are a little bit more self-conscious, are trying to make themselves puff up and look a little bit stronger. And the only way they know how to do that is by putting other people down. And so that's important to know. Usually when someone's negative towards you, it's more about them and says much more about them than it ever is about you or says about you. So I try to help people to change their perspective and not take on other people's stuff. When someone, says something negative to me, I think to myself, wow, they must be struggling a lot. There must be something going on for them, and I wish them well, and I'm not going to engage, and I'm just going to walk down another path, right? Sometimes we feel like we're taught in our society to be reactive, to yell, to scream, to be intense, because that's what our news and our media and our world is modeling for us right now. That's, in my opinion, not the answer. Kindness and compassion is the answer. And this is why I wrote the book. I want people to know why they're being reactive. I want them to have more compassion for themselves, because when you have more compassion and understanding and love for yourself, you have more for the world around you as well. And that message to me is not sent out enough, is not publicized enough in this world. And so, yes, the world can be a very negative place, but there is beauty everywhere. And so I tell people not to focus on the weeds in their garden or around them. I tell them because if all you're focusing on are the weeds, and that's all you're going to see, and you're never going to appreciate the beauty of the flowers that are there as well. Focus on cultivating the flowers, the kindness, the love, the skills, the positivity, the good energy, and not just for yourself, but spreading that out into the world. And that's going to not only change you, but it is one step at a time, one person at a time, going to change the world around you as well.
Wow, Denise, I think that was such a wonderful message, and it was amazing to hear this side of it. But since you just touched upon I was going to end it here on this amazing note. But since you just touched upon the book, The Ripple Effect,
Yeah.
it will be amazing to understand that your book, The Ripple Effect, change your mind, change your life. Uh, there are 8 steps in that you talk about achieving mindfulness or mindset. So if you can just briefly talk about it to our viewers and listeners, I think it will be really great to understand about the book.
Yeah, I wanna grab it here. Hold on
Yeah,
one second. Because I want people to understand it's called ripple affect, not ripple
affect,
effect. Yeah,
affect.
which you
Okay,
you said perfectly fine, but the reason why I named it ripple affect is because affect is your emotional energy,
correct.
and we share our emotional energy with people 10 hands out. I mean, we can even be on a Zoom and your energy can be felt by the people on the Zoom, and that is not some kind of, ethereal monk on a mountaintop kind of dynamic. It is real science. We have energy. You can walk into a room and know that someone is upset without them even having to say a word. You can feel it. And so ripple affect is how our energy impacts those around us and how we're impacted by people around us. That is why I named the book that, because if you can change your mind, the 8 steps walk you through the process of understanding how your brain works, how to self-regulate, how to bring yourself back to balance, to understand what your patterns are, to learn how to kind of direct your own energy and direct your own thoughts, how to set your own goals, how to follow through on those goals, and how to change the recording of how you talk to yourself on a regular basis so that you can live your best life. And in doing so, in doing those 8 steps, you learn compassion, you learn mindfulness, you learn self-love and self-kindness and acceptance, and that kind of spreads out into the world. So that's why I wrote the book, and that's what I'm hoping people take away from it when they do it, because we're all going through a lot. Everybody's going through things, and we can all use a little bit of help.
Wonderful, Denise. I think this is so nicely put through, and it is great to understand what the ripple effect is and change your mind, which actually going to change your life. I think this is wonderful, and it's great message. I think I had one of the best 40-45 minutes of chat with you, and I'm looking forward to more and more chats and get a chance to host you on multiple different aspects. Probably we can break into 8 steps separately uh, and have a series around it. But it's going to be wonderful when it comes out. And thank you for spending this 40-45 minutes with us, and looking forward to more and more chats.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Take care. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you, Denise. Have a nice day and take care and stay safe.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and thank you for sharing. But please do subscribe to our channel, Sportsy Says, and help us spread the word about Sportsy. We go with the same handle, Sportsy Says, across all the social media platforms and podcasts.